Artist Naomi Natale uses the symbols of the human bone to represent how we belong to each other.
In 1996, that's when I lost my father. And then in 1998, I lost my brother and my two nephews, and then my friends, our neighbors, pastors, all those I knew all those people who got killed that same night.
Talk to me about your moment of awareness. When did you realize that change was necessary, however you define change?
In 2002, I traveled to Kenya as a photographer to photo document orphan children living in slums and tribal reserves. And it was life-changing. I met some of the most beautiful, amazing people in some of, the most challenging situations. And coming back and trying to process that experience and later translate that experience to people living in my community was something that I felt was really important.
That translation process, you said, how do you translate that to your community? That led to Cradle Project?
Yep.
Okay, so briefly, can you tell me a little bit about that? And then I would like to talk about how that got you to 1 Million Bones.
It took me a couple of years after going to Kenya, having some other experiences, and to kind of decide or to understand that there was a place to work at this intersection of art and activism. The project that I had come up with to directly address that experience I had in Kenya was called the Cradle Project. And that was a call to artists all over the world to create a representation of an empty cradle that would represent the lost potential of our orphan children. At that time in 2006, when it was launched, there were 48 million children orphaned in sub-Saharan Africa alone. And so it was a way to think about wrapping your head around what that actually means and inviting people to participate, and in that participation really process, what it means to have that many empty cradles. One of the things that we didn't know going into it was this understanding of how much that experience and that participation really opened people up and engage them in that issue.
How do we get from 550 cradles in Albuquerque to 1 Million Bones on the National Mall?
I did imagine the Million Bones on the National Mall while I was doing the Cradle Project, so I had that idea in my mind. Did I understand what it would take? Certainly not. There's a book, it's called We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed with Our Families. It's written by Philip Gorovich. It's about the Rwandan genocide that happened in 1994, where over 800,000 people were killed in 90 days in a country the size of Rhode Island. Everything about that genocide is inconceivable, really, to understand. If those bones of the people who had been murdered in Rwanda were piled in the streets of DC, would we have been brave enough to call it a genocide? Would we have been brave enough to act? And I pictured that visual. We're so fortunate to not see mass graves in our country, for ongoing conflicts. But these mass graves are being filled in countries, around the world. And we did make a promise through the Geneva Convention. Actually, we signed an international law that we would be responsible to take action if genocide were to happen again. And it has happened again, and we've failed on that law.
What does each bone represent? What does it represent to you?
Yeah, the symbol of the bone certainly is used to attest to the gravity of the issue. But more significantly, it's meant to remind us that we belong to each other, to move forward with this understanding and this respect that if we belong to each other, then we're responsible to one another. And what does that responsibility mean?
The feeling that I have is not about revenge. It's not about that. So if we have to think of revenge, then this is not a solution. All we need is forgiveness and thinking of the future. Like, what do we need as a Congolese so our kids, our younger brother, our brothers, the new generation will not go through what we've been through. I mean, you really don't do something until you know something. Then that's what 1 Million Bones is doing, to let people know what is going on in Congo, in Sudan, in Burma, in the other countries. Keep talking about it, like the messages, if the message can keep going, so people can do something about it.
As an artist, there's lots of ways that we could address issues. What made you choose 1 Million Bones?
You know, the image of 1 million bones, that, I guess, installation came to me as an image first, but the participatory factor of, it's a social arts practice is what
Right.
it's called, and it's the experience that a participant goes through that also is a part of the art. And, you know, for every bone that was on the mall, there was a story behind it. It was about over 3 years of work leading up to that. Every conversation, every classroom that we went in, and conversation that was had in that classroom, in these communities, with artists, with activists, with whomever, with our elected officials, that really was what that work was about.
So what do you think the job of the duty of the artist is?
You know, that's such an open question. It's such an interesting question because I don't think the role has to be any more or less than what an individual who considers themselves an artist wants to produce with their art. I am interested in this intersection, and the art world wouldn't consider what we do art. We know it is art, and so we'll move forward, and we'll always consider the projects that we do and these installations, or whatever the form comes out as art. But it's a hard question, so I leave it to others to decide what they want to think on that space.